Hey, good morning. It is July 28th, 2022. I'm coming to you from Laguna Beach, California, my hometown, in my studio. This video will be the third in my series. The first one we did was back in May of 21. Second was in September of 21, and this is now again into July, which I cannot believe it's the end of July. It's extraordinary to me. Summer's half gone, although it's kind of bizarre. We haven't really had much of a summer here in Laguna. I don't think the temperature has once gotten over 80. So the basis behind this video series is that it's just sharing fact with you. And most of what you're seeing today, in fact, I haven't seen a single talking head talk about exactly what's going on in the economy. They go back and forth between it's interest rates and the Fed fund rate. Are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? It's just baloney. The bottom line is there's two primary drivers behind where we're at in the economy. Both of them were affected by the Fed, in fact, driven by the Fed. And I think forensically, what we're going to find is that they should be all taken out to the woodshed because they have put our economy in probably the worst situation we have ever been in. And it's my belief that as these bubbles pop, we're going to see the biggest downturn that we have experienced in over 100 years. And without further ado, let me show you exactly why. I know that that might be hard to believe. There's a lot of people out there who are not going to be able to hear what I say. I understand that, but feel free, if you disagree, to reach right out to me. I'm available on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and here on YouTube. So let me show you what I'm talking about right here. This is what's known as M1. M1 is the primary money supply of US dollar currencies in circulation. And I'm not going to go into great detail because you don't need to hear it, but what you do need to see is what's going on historically here. Back in 1960, we had an outstanding M1 of about $500 billion. By the way, M1 again is money that's in circulation. It's in your pocket, it's in your bank, it's in your checking account, it's in your home safe deposit box or safe. So money, M1, has slowly, gradually grown over the course of 50, 60 years, right up until about 2010. And that was when we were faced, well, actually right in the middle of the great financial recession and attempting to recover. At the time, there was a Fed Reserve Chairman, was Ben Bernanke, and Ben said, we're going to stimulate the economy by doing what's known as QE. It was an experiment that had never occurred before. As you can see, M1 has just been really consistently growing. It grows, by the way, naturally, simply because there's more people. Our population has grown in the US, and there's more businesses that need to have access to free cash flow. So in 2010, Ben Bernanke said, we're going to crank up the printing presses, and we're going to stimulate the economy by injecting capital, by injecting liquidity, by putting money in the hands of those who drive our economy, which is, for the most part, our consumers. So over the course of 10 years, see, between 2010 and 2020, we doubled M1. Again, that was an experiment that we had no idea what the outcome was. Turned out pretty well, though, actually. We did stimulate the economy. We did get out the great financial recession, and we didn't end up with a lot of inflation as compared to now. Obviously, we're dealing with horrendous inflation, and it's far greater, by the way, than the 9.1% that they're sharing that it is. I mean, just look at housing prices, look at equivalent rent, look at the cost of gasoline. Some more expensive expenses, they're through the roof, and it's not 9.1%, but that's an easy way to keep the Fed, have the Fed keep us sort of at bay. Here's the point that I'm getting to, though, that in 2020, as a result of the pandemic shutdown and a deep fear by the US government, in fact, all the consumers and citizens of the US, that we were going to just destroy our economy. And in fact, it would have been destroyed had we not done something. And what we did was, here, we stimulated the economy using cash, but we didn't do it in a measured basis. Ben Bernanke increased it by 50%, about 100% over a 10-year period. Our Fed, in their great wisdom, increased it by more than 500% over the course of about 16 months. We went vertical. We introduced $18 trillion into the economy. $18 trillion. We grew it from $4 trillion to $22 trillion. This is an experiment that we have never undertaken. I don't think there's been a country in the world that has done anything close to this. And so why is this a problem? Well, I'll tell you why it's a problem. It stimulated bubbles in virtually every asset class. Look at single family homes. After this money was brought to the marketplace, single family homes took off. After this money was brought to the marketplace, cryptocurrency went through the roof. After this money was introduced to the consumer, the stock market exploded. After this money was introduced to the US population, the cost of cars were up 50%, lumber up, excuse me, an order of magnitude. Everything to the right of 2020 went up. And in fact, it not just went up incrementally, it blew up to disproportionate size. I think lumber was up 600% at one point. When you inject that much capital that quickly into a marketplace, well, we've never done it before, so we don't know historically or forensically what has happened, but we're starting to see the net results. Inflation goes through the roof, bubbles pop up everywhere, and now they're starting to deflate. So going back to the great financial recession of 08, we had a single problem. We had a single bubble, and that bubble was single family homes. And that was spurred, that bubble was spurred by free and cheap debt. When I say free, what I mean, anybody could have gone out and bought $1 million home. All they needed to do was lie on their application. It was unsustainable. And when it popped, it took a huge toll on our economy. Morgan Stanley almost went bankrupt. Bear went out of business. Lehman went out of business. There was a whole plethora of knock-on effects, unintended consequences associated with bursting that bubble. But remember, that was a single bubble. What we're dealing with today is the deflation of many, many, many bubbles, and that's the single-family home market. And we'll talk about interest rates in a moment, but single-family home market, that's just starting to roll over. Contracts are being terminated. Asking prices are coming down, and the list prices are actually coming down. Instead of having buyers pay well over asking, they're coming off. Those prices are coming down, and that's going to happen. That's going to continue for a while. One of the things I need to show you is the other primary cause of, I want to make sure you get this. The other primary cause of the bubbles that we're dealing with is interest rates. This is a chart going back to 1960. Note, here's the high peak. Back in 1981, Paul Volcker was the head of the Federal Reserve at the time. Jay Powell's job today. And because of inflation, and because inflation was off the hook at the time, he increased the discount and Fed funds rate dramatically, which obviously had a knock-on effect as it relates to mortgages. By the way, this is the 30-year fixed rate mortgage chart. Excuse me. Oh, tickle in my throat. Back in 1982, we were somewhere north of 18% for a single family home mortgage fixed rate. And the good news is that mortgage rate has declined consistently all the way down to the bottom here. Late 2020, 2021, we had fixed rates at 2.5%, a number that's just ludicrously low. But it's ludicrously low and artificially low because the Fed, our Federal Reserve, not only was printing all that money and distributing it to the economy, but they were buying treasuries and other securities that artificially lowered the interest rate. And as a result of that, money was so incredibly cheap that people just, boom, let's buy a house. And by the way, if you got in at 2.5% fixed rate, that's going to be potentially one of your greatest assets ever. You're not going to want to sell that property unless you could transfer the debt with it, which is not done today very often. But look, subsequent to that, we turned off the printing presses. We stopped quantitative easing. We went to quantitative tightening. And as a result of that, this interest rate, 30-year fixed rate mortgage, has gone up by more than 100%. And that has taken a devastating toll, which is just now starting to show up in the single family home market. But it's also taken a toll in the commercial real estate market as well. I'm not going to go into great detail on that, but trust me, it's not good. One of the primary drivers behind the U.S. Economy, as I mentioned earlier, is consumption. People like you and I going out and buying a car, an appliance, going to dinner, taking a vacation. And this is a chart of consumer sentiment. It's basically how you and I are feeling about the economy and how safe we feel. Note that we're here now. we're at or close to all-time lows in consumer sentiment. So you combine this really bad sentiment with, I'll show you another chart, which is fascinating, with where is my home builder chart? Yeah, whatever. Yeah, you combine this with the sentiment by the home builders and home buyers. Those are at or close to all-time lows. And I'm not picking on single family homes for any particular reason. There was a lot of good reason to go out and buy, particularly if you got free money and you got really cheap debt. But those days are over. The cheap debt is gone and the free money has been spent. And so what we're dealing with now is a horrendous hangover. And that hangover is going to be with us for quite some time. As I mentioned earlier, the great financial recession was devastating, and it was called great financial recession because it wasn't a typical recession. But that was, again, one bubble that popped. We're in the midst of bubbles popping everywhere, whether it's cryptocurrency, whether it's the stock market, commercial real estate is being devastated, and single family homes are well on their way to extreme pain. So guys, what I want to share with you to conclude is simply this, that the reality is we're going to go through a lot of pain, and it's going to get ugly. And as these bubble pops and there's a lot of loss of wealth in our country, there's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be a lot of fear. But as Warren Buffett says, you buy from fear and you sell into greed. And as Baron von Rothschild says, you buy when there's blood on the streets, even if it's your own. So my core belief is that we're going to see some generational buying opportunities that haven't been seen, well, for decades at best. There was a property, again, I'm a commercial real estate guy, so there was that's kind of near and dear to my heart. There was a property in St. Louis, Missouri, known as AT&T Center. It was 1.25 million square feet. Last time it was valued, it was done in 2016. The value is $210 million. It recently sold for $4.1 million, or just under $8 a square foot. This is a 1.25 million square foot building selling for $4.1 million. It's ludicrous. And these buying opportunities are starting to show up. So prepare, husband your resources, minimize your expenses. If you're in the stock market, might not be a bad time to get out. We tend to see as these bubbles collapse slowly, it could be years before we get to the bottom. And now's not a good time to write it down. All right. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more. And I will be back at you at some point. Have a lovely day.